thank you all for the very warm welcome. As he said, I am Sarah Savage. I've been developing PHP since 2003. And PHP and the community has changed significantly since I started a long time ago. But before we dive in, I want to say a special thank you to all the sponsors without whom this conference would not exist. And I want to thank all the speakers who came before me who have taught us some valuable lessons as part of this conference. Can we give them a round of applause as well as the sponsors? So 20 years has seen many things change in PHP. For a short history lesson for those of you who are not familiar with PHP, and this starts in 2004, 1 year after I started, PHP version was 4.3. Anybody use 4.3? Yes, a few of you did. And then PHP 5.0 came out, and I think it was out for about 5 minutes before PHP 5.1 came out. And then 5.2 came out, and somewhere in there, somebody had the idea to do PHP 6, and they were going to rewrite the whole thing. And as rewrites go, it didn't unfortunately pan out. But we did get in this time we got Symfony, we got Zen Framework 1. Anybody still remember Zen Framework 1? I call it the framework that won't go away because I am still seeing applications that are developed in it that need to be upgraded, that need Anna's services. Okay? And then PHP 5.3 came out in June of 2009, and it took a lot of the features that were going to go into 6 and brought them into PHP 5, like namespaces. Namespaces are one of the best things that ever worked with PHP. Everybody remember the underscore Zend underscore, namespaces changed that. In November 2010, we developed a release cycle for PHP that we currently use today with some modifications. I believe we just passed an RFC on that, did we not? Laravel 1 came out in 2011, 5.4 in 2012, and from there, PHP kind of took off. 5.5 came out. We elected to skip version 6 formally. 5.6, and then 7 was released in 2015. And this was really a turning point for PHP. It was the first major version in a very long time. PHP 5.3 was technically a minor version, even though it was a significant upgrade. PHP 7 was the first major release of PHP in a long time. Continuing on our little history lesson, our little walk through PHP history, 2020, PHP 8 was released. Anybody still on 8.0? Anybody? A few people? Yeah, it's been 4 years or 3.5 years. It's worth upgrading, but PHP 8 is another turning point. 2022 saw the end of PHP 7, and then to kind of skip through the rest of the history, if my clicker will work for me. We're now up to PHP 8.3 has been released. We're on 8.4 coming up. We're on Laravel 11. We have seen Frank de Jong. Anybody know Frank? He has passed 1 billion downloads of his packages for PHP, which is a huge accomplishment. And we are on Symfony 7 and 6.4 long term. So PHP has seen tremendous growth in the past 20 years. I personally have written thousands, if not millions, of lines of PHP. Probably not millions, but certainly thousands of lines of PHP. What have I learned from this experience? The first thing I learned is that programming, there we go. Programming is part skill, part art. I like to think of code as craft. AI is a big thing right now, And there are a lot of developers who are really scared that AI is going to take their job. But the thing is that code is a craft. Developing software is a craft. AI is not going to take the jobs of exceptional programmers like the people in this room. It's not going to cause us as a community to disappear because AI can't think like we do. It can't be creative like we can. Code is used to communicate with other humans. Code is a language. It's not just for computers. If we wanted to write just computer code, we'd all write assembly, and nobody wants to do that. So AI is not going to take our jobs. Code is a craft. It's one that we should treat with respect. The second thing I learned is there's plenty of work to be had in PHP. I know right now, for many people, the job market is very difficult. But I also know that there are a lot of large companies that use code in PHP and will continue to do so. Whether it's because they can't move to something else or they have a legacy system or they're developing new things in PHP, whatever the case is, there's considerable amount of work in PHP. And I hear from time to time that PHP is dying. Whoops. Okay. Thank you. That was a lightning talk for
Thank
sure.
you. Any questions?
All right. We're going to put that down, and we're just going to use the keyboard. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. I can't move around as much, but that's okay. We live with the technical difficulties. All right. So I hear that PHP is dying, but this is not true. PHP is, in fact, thriving. And we've heard it time and time again from people, oh, PHP is going away, PHP is being replaced. You should learn something else. It's not true. PHP is going to be here through the bitter end. And there are things still being written today in PHP. I have seen numerous startups that use PHP on a regular basis. I think this is a wonderful thing. And the things that have been done by the PHP Foundation to improve the language, those are amazing improvements to PHP that will help it be around for a very long time. Next that I have learned is that building a network is a key to having a long-term career in the PHP space. Having a network of people coming to conferences, doing what you're doing right now, is vital to being able to develop the kind of relationships that will help you have a long-term career in PHP. There are a number of ways that you can build that network. Coming to conferences is one. You can do it online. You can go to user groups. As Michelle mentioned in her talk, Cal Evans likes to say, if you don't have a user group near you, you're it. You can start a user group. You can participate in the community. You can build a mailing list. You can have a community. And you can be part of the community. You can build a network. The fourth thing that I've learned is that senior developers, what it means to be senior is not about the number of years that you have worked as a developer, but the way you have learned to think about problems. Senior developers focus on the business problems of their clients and the challenges that they have, and they are responsible for figuring out how to solve those problems. I like to say I solve problems, and sometimes I solve them with code. Writing lines of code is an incredibly expensive thing for a business to do. So as software developers, the less code we can write but still solve the problem, the better for them. Our job is not to produce the most code. Our job is not to punch some number of lines per day, but it's to solve the problems that our clients and those who are using our software are having. And if we can do that, we are successful whether we wrote 1,000 lines or none. In fact, some of the best merge requests I've ever seen delete thousands of lines of code and add nothing. And those are fantastic. Those are some of my favorites. So it's time to talk about frameworks. Who in here is a Laravel developer? Good number of you. Symfony? Okay. Zen/Mezio/Laminus? Okay. Cake PHP, anybody? Few? So I want to settle this debate once and for all, what the best framework in PHP is. Okay? So the best framework in PHP is, okay, The best PHP framework is the one that serves your business's interests. You didn't really think I was going to tell you that there's a best framework, did I? Did you? Thank you. The framework that solves the problem that you have is the one that you want to use. Whether it's Symfony or Laravel or Mezio or Laminus or Zend or Cake or WordPress or Drupal or Craft, or I'm sure I'm missing some that are out there. The one that solves the problem is the one that you want to use. It's okay to have opinions about frameworks. It's okay for us to have healthy discussion and debate about how frameworks work and how they're designed and their opinions and their behaviors and the things that they do. But it's important to remember that frameworks are a tool. They're not more than that. They're not a religious adherence. They're not a practice. We are not Symfony developers. We are not WordPress developers. We are not Laravel developers. We are PHP developers, first and foremost. So it's okay to have a favorite. But remember that when you have only a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So you want to be careful to remember the core of who we are as people. And as Michelle mentioned in her talk, it's important to speak kindly about all frameworks, because the framework that you denigrate today may be the framework that you're called on to work in tomorrow. And you don't want to have that in your history. And I know this from painful experience. Number 6, perfect is the enemy of good enough. If you have code that hasn't been shipped, it's not worth very much. Now, that's not to say experimenting has no value or that producing a prototype that never gets shipped is worthless, but it is to say if your job is to solve problems with code, if you spend all of your time perfecting the code and you never ship it, what you end up with is not worth a lot, because you don't have a solution that solves somebody's problem. I have worked for startups that unfortunately failed before they were able to ship version 1, and I have worked for companies that have been successful at shipping what many of us would think is the ugliest code we've ever seen in our lives. And just because code is not beautiful doesn't mean that it's not worth something, because if it solves a problem for somebody, it is incredibly valuable to that person. I've also learned that you know enough about something to teach it to somebody else. Okay? Not everybody in this room can stand up on the stage at a conference and speak, but we know from the people who prepared lightning talks that many of us can put our name on a whiteboard and come up with a topic and speak about it for 5 to 10 minutes and have something to say, because all of us know something worth teaching to other people. All of us have valuable knowledge. And if you want to know how well you know something, sit down and teach it to somebody else. I have learned more by preparing for conference talks than I have learned doing anything else. Because when I propose a talk, I may know 50% of a subject, but when I get on the stage, I need to know 90% of that subject. I need to know as much as I possibly can so that I can answer the question from the person who knows more than me, and I can answer the question of the person who has a thought that I hadn't considered. I need to be able to learn as much as I can so that I can teach it, and that helps me to know how much I do know and how much I don't. This also means, that there's always someone who knows more than you, and being humble is a valuable skill as a developer. I'm happy to say that there are many people in this room who are way smarter than I am. And I know in fact, I would hope that about something, everybody in this room is way smarter than I am. Because we all have different experiences. We've all had different outcomes and things that we've gone through in our lives. We all have unique perspectives. So it's always worthwhile to be humble and to remember that someone always knows more than you about something. When you recognize this, you never stop learning. You never stop having that perspective of a beginner, and you never stop being curious. Curiosity is a critical piece of being a software developer because we have an obligation to solve hard problems for people in ways that are unique to them, in ways that they haven't thought of, in ways that we haven't invented yet. And so learning is something that we have to do on a regular basis. You never stop learning as a software developer. It's important as a software developer to become an expert at something. It's okay if you're an expert in the front end, the back end, developer operations, in management. Management is a skill. It's you as a developer, a lot of people go into development and then they get promoted to manager. That's really not how it should work because management is a skill that you have to learn. But become an expert at something. Becoming an expert helps make you an authority in that topic, and it helps you to really project that authority to those who need to hear it, who need to understand that you're the expert at something. And just because you're an expert doesn't mean that somebody doesn't know more than you about that thing. It just means that you happen to have a level of understanding that makes you the premier person for most cases of that thing. And so if you can become an expert, then you can project the authority that your clients need, that the business needs, that your customers need, and that the people who are working with you need in order for you to be effective as a leader in your job and in your work. I mentioned it a little bit, but I want to encourage you to consistently embrace the joy of being a beginner. How many people in here remember learning PHP? Okay. All of us were beginners once. In 2003, I was a beginner in PHP, and I thought it was really cool. And I wrote this entire PHP application, and you can imagine what the code looked like in PHP 4, let alone, somebody who was like, I don't know, I was 18 at the time, what the code probably looked like. And I sent it to a friend, and I said, hey, sign up for this game that I'm going to run. And he took hours writing a profile. It was a role-playing game, and he wrote this profile. And he hit the submit button, and the page refreshed, and it was all gone. This was my first experience with quotes. Because the database did not save because he put an apostrophe in his writing. Now, this wasn't terribly a joyful experience for either one of us. But what I remember about that is the joy of experiencing learning and seeing how my code was being used and finding a solution, because I was able to solve it and say, hey, guess what? I have a solution for this. I now know what the cause of the problem is. The debugging, and it was frustrating at first, but it was also, there was a joy to understanding the problem and solving it. Because this was the first time anyone had used my code who wasn't me. And it was the first time that I could solve a problem and point to it and say, hey, go try this out. This bug is fixed. Trying new things keeps your perspective fresh. It helps you see the world differently than you see it today. And it helps you understand the perspectives of others. For example, I'm in the process right now of learning Rust. And I think this is important because there are concepts from Rust that will be valuable to me as a PHP developer. But beyond that, learning a new language, I get that joy of being a beginner again. Now, maybe I won't have the same issue with quotes, but I've certainly had some adventures. And at the end of the day, I have this fresh perspective. It helps me to remember that I am not an expert at everything. I may be very good at PHP, but I am very bad at Rust. In the process of learning something new, I encourage you to study the documentation for whatever it is you're learning about. And don't just read it. Actually take the time to study it, to read it outside of the context of the current problem that you're in. And what I tell developers who are just starting with this is set aside time every day to learn a new function. Set aside time to understand something new, some new concept, some new behavior, something new. You never know when that's going to come in handy. You never know when that tool that you just put in your toolbox is going to come back out and be useful. And it's important to remember that the better we are at our craft, the more knowledge we have about our craft, the better the outcomes we'll have for those who depend on our craft. When it comes to studying, the documentation is not the only place to learn. You want to read a lot of code, other people's code. You want to read a lot of it, tons of it. Anybody in here practice code reviews on a regular basis? Yeah, about half the room at least. Code reviews are not just about making comments on somebody else's code. They're about learning how somebody else thinks. I will ask a more junior developer to review my code because I want them to learn from it, and I want to review their code because I will learn from it. They will have solutions to problems that I have not thought about. I actually reviewed some code the other day with a middleware handler, and the solution that this developer had come up with, while not the correct solution, was innovative and unique. And I learned something about the way this person thought and the way this person worked within a system that allowed me to both give feedback and also learn something new about them. So code reviews are as much about learning as they are about quality. Do them for both reasons. When it comes to software, while studying the documentation matters, learning the programming concepts matters even more. I am a PHP developer probably for life. I will be doing PHP when they turn the lights out on the foundation in 40 years, when PHP and COBOL are in the same track. I will be a PHP developer forever. I will be a PHP developer in version 17, okay? But I want you to remember that the programming concepts are important because languages come and go. The popular language of today may not be the popular language of tomorrow. But solid design patterns, SQL databases, they've all been around for a very long time. The gang of four who wrote the design patterns book, they're still in print. There's a very good reason why. It's because those patterns still matter. Now, I'm not saying PHP is going anywhere. In fact, I already told you that PHP is thriving, and I believe this to be true. But I also believe that it's very important that the concepts be learned, because once you've learned them, they apply to other languages. And PHP, while it is a great tool, is a tool. It is not always the best tool for every job. So knowing the concepts helps you to translate from PHP to something else like Python or Rust or Go or JavaScript or any of those other languages. So I encourage you to learn the concepts behind the language and to understand what it is that you're doing. Coming to conferences is a great way to do that. I've also learned to be very boring. I take pride in the fact that I have a very boring stack and that I do a lot of really exciting things with a very boring stack. The truth is that boring stacks don't break very easily. So if you're using Linux, MySQL, PHP, and Apache or Nginx, that stack is time-tested and time-honored and is not going to break down as easily as something random that we've put together. Now, all of us like the shiny thing, and the shiny thing is cool, and we can use the shiny things. But the more boring our stack is, the better the outcomes we're going to have for the people who depend on them. And I really believe firmly that many interesting things can be built with a boring stack. Facebook started out as a boring stack, and I think it still has a boring stack. Much of the internet runs on what you would consider a boring stack. So I am a big fan of the boring stack. As a software developer, your integrity is extremely important. Okay? As a software developer, being someone of integrity matters, and it's a state of being honest. You tell it like it is, and you be truthful with those who depend on you. As software developers, sometimes we're asked to do things that are not in the best interest of our clients, or in the best interest of our users, or in the best interest of our companies. And nobody wins when you cut your estimate to meet a deadline, or when you pull your punches about the right way to do something, or whether when you say, oh yeah, that's fine, when you know that it's not okay. And it's important to remember that your integrity matters, because if you cut your estimate to meet a deadline, it's still going to take the time you probably said it would take from the beginning. But now you're going to be late, and now your integrity is at risk. Along with this, having hard conversations doesn't get easier with time. Having conversations with your boss or the management or with clients or customers about difficult things doesn't necessarily get easier as time goes on. And sometimes being in technology means sharing these difficult things, like we're going to be late on this project, or we're not going to make this sprint, or we're going to have to delay a release because it's not ready to go out the door. You don't want to tell your boss this the day before you are supposed to get the release out. You want to tell them as quickly as possible so that they can plan. Okay? And a lot of people will say to me, but I'm afraid that they'll fire me. So they fire you. There's lots of work in PHP. Sucks to have to get a new job. But you want to leave with your integrity. You want to be honest. You want to present the truth to the people who are in power, who are responsible for the company, because to you it might just be a missed deadline. To them it might be a missed promise to a key customer, and that key customer might leave and go to the competition. But by communicating early enough, they can save that relationship. Having your integrity helps to preserve the relationships in business and in development. Along the same lines, authenticity is extremely important. Being yourself, being authentic to who you are and what you believe in and what your principles are, is extremely important as a software developer. This is a quote that I wrote when I started to realize that I was transgender. I put it on my blog under my dead name. But this quote talks about being authentic, and I think it really resonates with me still, that we don't necessarily want to be what others expect or want us to be, but we want to be who we really are. And I know that when I came out, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders, because I was finally authentic to who I really was. And it was extremely important to me to live an authentic life. And I hope that as a developer, I can be as authentic as I am to myself as a person. The reality is that when you're authentic, not everybody's going to love you, but the ones who do will love you. They'll love you specifically. They'll love you for who you really are. I encourage you as software developers, and a lesson that I've learned is that we should all be contributing back to the community. Open source isn't just about code. In the beginning of this conference, we were asked who's contributed to open source. And I'm not going to ask you to stand up, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand or anything like that. But what I am going to say is that every person in this room benefits from the work that people do for free. Or some of them are paid as part of the foundation, or they've made it their job. But they've made the code available for free. Every one of us benefits from that. Open source is not just about contributing code. There are other things you can do for the open source world that we all depend on for our livelihoods. We're all here because of an open source project that was made available to us at no cost. There are ways you can contribute. You can Sponsor conferences or encourage your company to do so. I had you give the sponsors a round of applause at the beginning, and I firmly believe that this conference would not be here without them, and I am very thankful that they chose to sponsor. You can fund open source yourself or through your company. There's a command in Composer Fund. That command will list all the projects looking for funding. If you use a project and you rely on that project for a significant portion of your effort in your business or in your career, it's worth considering giving back. Documentation counts as contributing to open source. And I'm not saying you have to write massive amounts of documentation in order to contribute. What I'm saying is, if you see a typo, at the very bottom of the PHP documentation, I believe there's a link to open a pull request. Am I right? And you can open a pull request right there and just fix the typo. Okay? You can do that. It's okay. It's part of all of our responsibility to do that. You don't have to write a huge new explanation, but fixing the typos, fixing the bugs, or even contributing something small to the documentation counts. You can also blog about your favorite tools, and yes, blogs still exist. I have one. I know people in here who have them. They're great ways of sharing things that you really enjoy with others. So I encourage you to do it. The last thing I encourage you to do is to meet your heroes, especially your PHP heroes. They're very much like you. I owe my career to a good number of people in this room for whom, when I met them the first time, I was starstruck, and who mentored me and who brought me into the fold of the community and who taught me how to be a PHP developer. And they have been with me as I transitioned, as I built a business, as I built a consultancy, as I've had crazy ideas, as I've done interesting things. And they have been part of my life for the last 20 years. They are extremely important to me, and they are extremely valuable to me as people, as professionals, and as mentors. And I am incredibly thankful for them. But I would not have had those opportunities if I had been afraid of people like Rob Allen or Anna. Okay? The PHP people are very reasonable, rational people. They're very good people. There's a lot of people in this room who have done a lot of great things. I encourage you to meet with them, to talk with them, to do what you're doing exactly right here at this conference, because they are very much like you, and they just want to see the community succeed. So thank you to those who have mentored me, who have helped me grow as a professional. There are too many to name. I am so thankful that they invested in me as a person, as a professional, and as a developer. So with that, I say, here's to 20 more years of PHP. I'll be here until they turn the lights out. I hope you will join me on the adventure. PHP will look very different in 2044 than it does today. I think it will be better. I think Derek will come in here with a walker, maybe. But it is, in fact, something that we can all hope for, is that in 20 years, we have built a wonderful community that is encouraging and welcoming and open to everybody. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I think if someone has anything to say, any question, anything to add, we can take some. Or we can just say goodbye.
I think Derek might be mad at me now.
Okay, so I will personally thank you for your keynote. Thanks to all the speakers, because I think we had some amazing speakers in these 2 days, these PHP days, amazing keynotes. And so thank you all. And please give another warm round of applause for Sarah. Thank you.